What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So about a month ago, Redfall released, and with the reviews that hit and the poor reception, people were kind of confused as to what exactly happened here. Well, now we have a new report that seems to shed some light and pull back the curtain, and actually might be worse than we originally thought. We'll go over all of that though here today. Also, we are going to be talking about virtual reality and augmented reality, and a bunch of games and hardware that were announced this coming from Meta. And we'll also be talking about a remake that was actually discussed a little while ago, and now it's coming back up, making me wonder if we're about to see Square Enix make a big time announcement. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're gonna start today with a company called Vanpool. Now, they are a video game development company that unfortunately announced that they had dissolved May 31st. This was posted up over on their website. It's a pretty clear-cut message. We have continued to develop games thanks to everyone's kindness, but due to various circumstances, we have decided to disband, and they do mark the date May 31st. Now, while you may not have heard of Vanpool necessarily, you've certainly heard of some of the games that they have been working on. They've been around since 1999, and most recently, they've been co-developing games with HAL Laboratory. So, Super Kirby Clash, Kirby Fighters 2, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe. If you want to go back to a game that they basically developed completely by themselves, Dylan's Rolling Western, but again, they have been around since 1999, so quite a while there, and there's no reasoning that's really been described here as to why they've decided to dissolve. You figured it wouldn't be a money situation, considering they're not having a hard time finding work with Nintendo and HAL. So it could be other things behind the scenes logistically, or just with some of the leaders. Who really knows there? But the big thing is now, obviously, there are, I'm sure, a lot of developers and employees that, well, we're just left out with no job now. So hopefully, really, HAL or Nintendo can look around and maybe onboard some of that talent, because it's pretty clear they know what they're doing with the Kirby franchise. Also, it does look like we're getting closer and closer to that Final Fantasy 16 demo drop. As this was noticed, you can see a screenshot that was posted up over on Reddit, showing the Final Fantasy 16 demo at the top in library next to the standard edition and the digital deluxe edition. People were noticing that it was just kind of popping up in their library. Some of them mentioned that if they had already started to load or had purchased, I guess, the digital deluxe or anything like that, it was starting to appear. Others just said, hey, it's in my library for some reason. And this could just be issues or glitches or whatever going on there with the store, as, yeah, we're getting pretty close to that demo getting dropped. And I believe it's going to happen at Summer Game Fest. It seems like the obvious place at this point. They mentioned they wanted it to go out, a couple of weeks before release, and it'd be really cool if it's one of those demos where we get to play, as they mentioned, the first bit of the game, then their save data transfers over, so kind of a way to get started on the game a bit early there. So that's, I guess, the next stop here is Summer Game Fest, to see if we can start playing Final Fantasy 16 shortly after the show ends. Oh, and no surprise, the Super Mario movie continues to break records and is coming up pretty close to being the highest grossing animated movie ever created. This was actually posted up here over on The Independent, who says Super Mario Bros. Movie Ice is Frozen, that's clever, to become the second biggest animated film of all time. Now, running the numbers, it beat Frozen by about $4 million. It's still quite a ways behind Frozen 2. If we take a look at Super Mario movie, $1.288 billion. Frozen 2 is at $1.45 billion. So the Super Mario movie will have to continue to churn out some pretty good weeks for the box office here to be able to catch. But even so, this being the first big push by Nintendo into the movie theater with the box office like this is impressive stuff. And, you know, the floodgates, I'm sure, have probably opened within Nintendo and Illumination and a bunch of other companies that want to make TV series, streaming series, and movies with them, because, yeah, something tells me they can probably replicate this, even not necessarily to this degree, but close to it, I'm sure, with some of their other franchises that they have in mind. But Super Mario movie continues, like I said, to gather up money and break records. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Redfall, which released, and it had all kinds of issues with it. I played all the way through the game, and they were very, very noticeable, whether it was the AI being very strange, the gunplay being all right, and it not necessarily having the immersive sim elements where you'd be able to go about solving problems in many different ways. It just was a very mediocre to bad game from a studio, Arcane Austin, that we figured would actually show up with a good game, especially after what they were able to accomplish with Prey. While not a commercial success, I think the game itself was very interesting and certainly unique. Well, Jason Schreier did post up a report detailing some of the issues that they had run into in development. And we're going to start with this passage here again from Jason Schreier. I'll leave this link down below in the sources. I recommend reading through it because it's a very good report here. But he starts by saying the project suffered from unclear direction, frequent attrition, and a perennial lack of staff, according to more than a dozen people who have worked on the game, speaking anonymously because they were not authorized to discuss it publicly. Spokesperson for Redfall's publisher Bethesda Softworks declined to comment. Now, to summarize some of the big points here with this report, essentially Redfall's development started in 2018, and really ZeniMax was leaning on a lot of their studios to create a game that has more post-spend to it. That is microtransactions, essentially. In fact, it was mentioned by some of the sourcing here that for about 3 years of Redfall's development, there were in fact microtransactions and item shop of some kind, and eventually they removed it, mostly because they were noticing the backlash that a lot of these live service games were receiving. But still, the leads there at Arcane Austin decided, hey, let's make a multiplayer game and kind of work into what ZeniMax wants, which really they wanted to be sold. So they figured, hey, if we have these live service or games as a service titles, will be more enticing to acquire. And they made it happen. Obviously, Microsoft came in and completed the acquisition at the tail end of 2020 for $7.5 billion. But for about 2 years, though, leading up to that point, they were developing Redfall. And the unfortunate part is, while the leads there seemed pretty happy with what was happening, the ground level developers were not. And in fact, many of them continued to leave as it was sort of clashing with what they wanted to do, which was create more unique single player experiences like Prey. So this clashing of ideas, visions in different meetings where they explain the concepts, and the continuous turnover of staff really took its toll on Redfall, and you kind of see the results after it released. And even though Phil Spencer mentioned that they were a little surprised with how the reviews turned out, it seems like many of the sources here were not. And as they described their tenure there, they're not really surprised to see that roughly 70% of the Arcane Austin staff who had worked on Prey are no longer at the company. Now, the wildest part about this entire report is that some of the people who were working at Arcane Austin when Microsoft bought ZeniMax and Bethesda were wondering, oh, great, can we actually reboot or cancel this completely? And instead, Microsoft came in and said, yes, we can cancel the PS5 version. We're going to be hands off. You guys do what you want. And the leads there at Arcane Austin seem to push forward with Redfall. So, to me, while people are looking at this as being a major fault for Microsoft for having Redfall even still be a thing, it's more or less ZeniMax and then the leads with Arcane Austin and then Microsoft, because this is a situation where Microsoft should not have had the hands-off approach that they were attempting to approach all of these studios with. They should have shown up and said, hold on a minute, what's the strategy here, and do we need to kind of go back and start from scratch? So really, the only thing I can take away from this is what hopefully Microsoft has taken away from it, and that is they can't be hands-off completely like they were trying to be here for all these different studios and projects. Some of them need a bit of a firmer hand than others. Like, I do see something with Starfield where, okay, Microsoft doesn't necessarily need to be there every single day directing them with the course and all this. That seems like something Bethesda knows what they're doing, and they can provide support when it comes to the technical side of things. But for Arcane Austin, they probably should have directed them a bit more and taken control of that situation. But maybe it's something they can learn from as they go forward and not have another Redfall situation on their hands. Next up, let's talk about the Meta Quest 3. That's right, we had an entire announcement as well as a showcase for a bunch of virtual reality and augmented reality games and software. Let's start though with some of the hardware here. The Meta Quest 3 is indeed a thing, and it is coming out sometime this year. We're looking towards like the fall or holiday season. They gave us the pricing at $499. That's for the 128 gigabyte model. There will be a more expensive model also available at that 256 storage capacity. The Quest 2 is dropping in price to $299 starting June 4th. Remember, they raised the price and now they're dropping it back down. But again, parts and all this stuff, I believe with the supply chain is really coming more under control, so we're able to do that. The Quest 2 is going to get a software update, though, to improve the CPU performance by 26% and the GPU performance by 16%. As for the Quest 3, it will have a next-gen Snapdragon chipset that's twice the graphical power compared to the Quest 2. It will be 40% slimmer in design, which I think is the correct direction for all of this. They need to get these headsets smaller and smaller and smaller so the overall footprint is not as noticeable in the front of your face. The controllers are redesigned, so they removed like the big hoop at the top, which is the tracking ring. It will also have hand tracking supported out of the box, so you don't need controllers necessarily for everything. And that sort of plays into the idea of the pass-through view, which is improved for augmented reality. So if you say, look at your table, you can have a board game right there, and you can interact with virtual objects with just your hands due to the new tracking support. I will say I didn't notice any mention of eye tracking, but they did talk about the higher resolution displays as well as the pancake lenses, so it should be a very clean viewing experience there for all the different games that they announced. So for games, Assassin's Creed Nexus VR, they're going to have a bit more information on that at the Ubisoft Forward event coming up here in the next week or so. Asgard's Wrath 2, that would seem like the big announcement towards the end, winter 2023. Samba de Amigo Party Central, that's the fall. NFL Pro Era 2 later this year. Stranger Things VR this fall. Ghostbusters Rise of the Ghost Lord, fall. I Expect You to Die 3, okay, summer. Then we have Silent Slayer, Racket Club, Vampire the Masquerade, that's later this year. That's also on PSVR 2. I noticed PlayStation was kind of tweeting about this as well. Arizona Sunshine 2, that's later this year. Dungeons of Eternity 2023. The Seventh Guest later this year. Attack on Titan VR, that's slated for winter. The trailer's a little weird on that in that it seems like it's all simulated gameplay. It's not the actual gameplay itself, so we'll see how that turns out. And then the one that I noticed, and I thought kind of cool, Bulletstorm. That's later this year, will also be on PSVR 2. So we have a bunch of games, we have new hardware, but the thing that I really took away from this is kind of the shift a bit to augmented reality, and I sort of think that should be the direction for this whole immersive experience that seems to be Meta's big push to tie into their metaverse. Augmented reality has a lot of benefits over virtual reality in that it can be a more social experience because you can see the world around you while you're interacting in a game, or more practical uses, like say you're trying to do interior design and you have clients and you want to show them how a room will look when you move things around or add different items. You can do that just on the fly virtually. That seems like something that would be pretty cool to have. So I'm thinking that would be at least something that'd be a bit more easier to sell in a business setting as well as to the mainstream. And the fact that you could most likely have augmented reality headsets has even smaller footprints compared to virtual reality, something to certainly keep an eye on there. But the Quest 3, I'm gonna maybe pick that one up and check it out. It at $500, technically cheaper than PSVR 2's headset, and you also don't need a PS5 because it's an all-in-one device, and it's getting quite a few games here. I think that's going to at least be enticing to people who want to find their way into VR without spending over $1,000 to do so. Even, the Quest 2 at $300, also not bad. But overall, not a bad presentation here from Meta with some new Quest hardware and a bunch of VR games to look forward to later this year. Next up, let's talk about a big-time remake that we had discussed a while ago when that NVIDIA leak list got out there and it was spotted and people were like, is this a thing? Will we really see Square Enix go back and remake this title? Well, it's come up again in the news, and the source on it, it still aligns with the NVIDIA leak list. And do you want to go against the NVIDIA leak list? Because it keeps proving to be correct time and time again, which we'll talk about, the latest game that actually got checked off the list. But we can see this posted up over on Game Rant, who says the rumor was recently given more credibility by Reset Era user I'm a Hero 2, who was previously among the first to report that the widely anticipated Persona 3 remake is happening. In fact, most people assume that is happening at the Xbox Showcase in a little under 2 weeks now. In a series of posts from earlier this week, this ostensible insider claimed to have seen the Final Fantasy IX remake. Now, they go on to say that it has Sony written all over it and that it wouldn't be coming to the Switch. I am picturing this Final Fantasy IX remake because I do believe it is a thing, which should be interesting to see that get unveiled. But I'm picturing it closer to the budget and build and presentation of Trials of Mana, for example. I don't think they're going to do the Final Fantasy remake treatment. I think this one will be a more true to the original source material remake, and it won't be that huge $100-some-odd million budget put behind it. But like I mentioned, it is on the NVIDIA leak list, and there are a lot of examples of different games you can point to on there, like Payday 3, that showed up there, and then that got announced, and even something that's a bit more obscure, like Tactics Ogre Remastered. Who thought that was going to end? Okay, now it's out. But if you look, there's an entire Reddit thread that I'll link down below in the sources where people are continuing to stay up to date on this. And like you can see, like for Sony, you have Helldivers 2. That's checked off, right? You have Uncharted Legacy Thieves Collection. But Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is indeed going to PC, and that was what was being tested here through the NVIDIA streaming service. And under Square Enix, you can see a Final Fantasy IX remake that has not yet been checked off, as well as the Final Fantasy Tactics Remaster. I believe that's a thing as well. So it seems like it's going to be really exciting for people who are fans of some of the more classic Final Fantasy games from that PS1 generation. And now it comes down to when would they announce it, and is that something we could look forward to for Summer Game Fest or something later in the year, maybe even in the next couple of years. But something to keep an eye on here, because who's really going to go against that NVIDIA leak list right now? And in our last bit of news, let's talk about some more information that was revealed with Spider-Man 2, which is Sony's big game for later this year. They keep saying the fall, so somewhere between, I would say, September or November, somewhere in there. But we got some information around character swapping, which we did see that at least demonstrated to a degree during that entire sequence with Miles and Peter. But we can see this posted up over on Eurogamer. This talking with Insomniac saying we have content designed around Peter, we have content designed around Miles, and we have content where you can play either. You'll be able to, in the open world, freely switch between them with a simple button press. They mentioned this is thanks to the power of the PS5 and I guess the SSD, where it won't be like GTA 5, it takes a while to switch between characters. Apparently it's nearly instantaneous. I'm sure there'll still be an animation to go from one to the other, but it'll be much faster. Being able to switch in the open world so quickly between the two characters is really, really awesome. Just being able to pick and choose who I want to play as for a certain activity, it's been so awesome to have that feature. It's something we probably wouldn't have explored previously. And this does tie into skill trees that they described, one for Peter, one for Miles, and then one that's kind of shared between the two of them. So for Miles, he'll be leveraging kind of his Venom upgrades and powers, and then for Peter, he'll be upgrading the symbiote suit that he's running around with. As for the world itself that he'll be swinging around in, according to Insomniac, it's roughly twice the size of Spider-Man 2018 on the PS4, and will now include Queens and Brooklyn. So it seems like there's going to be a lot to explore here, and I'm really looking forward to Spider-Man 2. We just need that release date. So here's hoping in the next couple of months, I guess, we get a PlayStation blog post that gives us more information on top of what we know and the release date. Again, cross my fingers for September just because I want to get to this game sooner rather than later. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're going to take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, which upcoming June showcase are you most interested in seeing? Look at that, Summer Game Fest, 49%, over the Xbox showcase at 39%. And then look at this, Devolver Direct, coming in third. Hey, Devolver, they deliver. I will give them that. And their presentation is just genuinely fun. But Summer Game Fest taking the lead over Xbox. Maybe that's because it's coming up sooner, or just because it could be a grab bag of different announcements. So technically, if you're not interested in what Xbox would be showing, there could be like stuff from Sony or EA or whoever at Summer Game Fest. So hey, exciting stuff coming up here in the next week or so. Should have a ton of games getting unveiled. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Tony. It says, oh man, I missed this poll. I'm with you on wanting X9, but I think the series with the most potential for success that Capcom would want to get behind is Mega Man Legends. Well, they could definitely draft a better narrative, I think, for Mega Man Legends, because it'd be a bigger open world 3D style game, we would assume. But I think Legends could use that collection to maybe spark some more interest in the series. That's the only reason I could think of the poll results went the way they did, where Legends was nowhere near something like X9. But I mean, if anything, with how we see the Legacy collections going, Legends would have to be up next. So here's hoping we get that, because one, I mean, the games are expensive, right? But two, kind of introduce that to a whole new audience. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Where's Final Fantasy IX? Would you like to see that remake happen? And what do you think it's going to look like when it does get shown for the first time? And then also, what about Redfall, that entire report, the situation going on there with ZeniMax and Arcane Austin, and then Microsoft? And then also, what about the entire meta presentation with the Quest 3 and a bunch of different games? Thanks guys for watching. Have a great weekend. I'll see you back here Monday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time for Newswave.